brothers, sisters, ladies, gentlemen, and others. Welcome. Welcome to today's episode of TV Courtroom. This is yours truly, Michael Cord Esquire, aka Michael X, aka the angriest black man in America. We're dealing with two important topics today. I'm going to start off with the President's House Slavery Memorial at 6th and Market. And a very, very, very important event is coming up in about a week and a half. I'll get to that in just a couple seconds. That's the first topic. The second topic, we're going to have a guest by the name of Pamela Boyce Simms, who's spearheading the Black Men's Health Initiative at my historic alma mater, Cheney University. So we're going to talk to Pamela Boyce Simms in about 25 minutes or so. So make sure you get your pens out, make sure you get your pads out because she has some important information to share. Now remember folks, I said there are two topics. That's the second one. Now let me jump into the first. It's a very long story, but I'll give you the approximately 25-minute version instead of the 10-hour version. And it pertains actually to the President's House Slavery Memorial at 6th and Market. That is an important site, more important now than possibly when it had its grand opening in 15 years ago in December of 2010. You might say, well, Mike, if it's such a historic site, how could the upcoming event be possibly more important than the grand opening event back on December 15, 2010? Here's how. And as I told you, folks, I'm going to give you the 25-minute version. And I'm really hoping that folks take note of what I'm sharing because it's historically and immediately important. It goes like this. Back in 2002, 23 years ago, there was an article in a local newspaper indicating that the Liberty Bell Center, which back then was at 5th and Market, the article indicated that it was going to be moving a block west to 6th and Market. And at that time, back in 2002, I was the substitute host, the guest host for the great Mary Mason. And Mary Mason is arguably, it's definitely the greatest radio show host for the Black community of Philadelphia than anybody else. If you don't know anything about the great Mary Mason, you must Google her. And I made my connection to the great Mary Mason through the great Charles W. Bowser, arguably the greatest Black civil rights lawyer and political insider in Philadelphia history. I have to pretty much say it's a tie between the great Charles W. Bowser and the great Cecil B. Moore. I had the benefit, the pleasure, the blessing to be able to work with him beginning back in the late 90s before he retired, about 3 or 4 years before he passed away in 2010. But here's the story. So remember what I said, 2002 newspaper article announcing that the Liberty Bell Center was going to move from 5th and Market to 6th and Market. And the reason is because they got so many tourists from all over the city and all over the state and all over the region and all over the country and all over the world. It was so many folks coming into the Liberty Bell Center that the site at 5th and Market was too cramped in and too crowded and too congested. So they found a larger space about a block west. So when I heard the story again, I was sitting in for the great Mary Mason, and when she was unavailable during one show, I announced it. And the African-American community who heard the show said, hey, interesting, but not really relevant to us. And I agreed. The second thing we find out, and we're still in 2002, folks, is that that new site of the Liberty Bell Center at 6th and Market is where America's first White House stood. You might say, how could that be? Well, here's how it could be. Way back in 1790, there was something called the Federal Residence Act. And that Federal Residence Act said, hey, we're going to make the United States Capitol in Washington, D.C. But here in 1790, Washington, D.C. is pretty much swampland. So we have to clear out that swampland, put down asphalt and cement and all that kind of stuff. But while we're getting Washington, D.C. in order, we're going to make Philadelphia the temporary capital. And at 6th and Market, there was a majestic house. And so Congress decided that they would lease that house at 6th and Market temporarily for George Washington while Washington, D.C. was under construction. And so we in the Black community said, hey, that's an interesting story, but again, not really relevant to us as Black folks. That was the second thing. And then we get to the third thing. Remember the first thing, the move to Liberty Bell Center. The second thing, move to what was and can be called America's first White House. Officially, it was called the President's House or the Executive Mansion or the Robert Morris Mansion. But based on that 1790 Federal Residence Act, it served as America's first White House. So, okay, move the Liberty Bell to 6th and Market. That's one, that's two. So what's the big deal? The big deal is this. George Washington enslaved Black men, Black women, and Black children at America's first White House right here in Philadelphia at 6th and Market. I got to tell you, folks, when I found that out and when I related to the radio station audience, we all were outraged. I mean, we were furious. We were angry. And that's one of the reasons, among many others, that I call myself the angriest Black man in America. And I took that from what the great James Baldwin said. And to paraphrase the great James Baldwin, what he said was this: to be Black and conscious in America is to be in a constant state of rage. So the more you find out about America, the more you find out about slavery and sharecropping and convict leasing and Jim Crow and lynching and disenfranchisement and mass incarceration and police brutality and gerrymandering and redlining, the more you find out about that stuff, you got to be enraged. But as James Baldwin taught us, that rage can't be destructive. It must be constructive. It must be productive. And education is the way to that. So let me get back to the point. Remember, 1, Liberty Bell Center moved. 2, moved to America's first White House. And 3, George Washington enslaved Black men, women, and children there. Many of us knew that he had enslaved a total of 316 Black men, women, and children at his Mount Vernon, Virginia plantation. But pretty much nobody knew anything about him taking 9 of those 316 and enslaving them illegally here in Philadelphia. Now, you might say, come on, Mike, if you're talking about George Washington starting this in 1790, well, yeah, slavery is horrible, but it wasn't illegal. Slavery was a legal concept from 1619 to the 13th Amendment in 1865. So 1790 is during that time period. So even though it was outrageous and horrific and a crime against humanity, it was legal. Well, it wasn't. Not here in Pennsylvania. I'm going to come back to that. So here's the thing. Remember again, because I'm going to give you a test afterward. Liberty Bell Center moves. That's 1. It moves to the America's first White House. That's 2. And number 3, that's where George Washington enslaved Black men, women, and children. The reason why I said earlier that I felt betrayed is because I was born and raised in Philly. I went to arguably the best school in America, Masterman. I went to the oldest HBCU on the planet, Chan University. I went to the largest university on the planet for law school, Ohio State University, and I never heard about it. And one of the main reasons that I didn't hear about it is because the folks who knew about it kept it secret until historians, including and primarily a gentleman by the name of Ed Lawler. Ed Lawler was able to unearth all the hidden secrets and put it out there. And we in ATAC found out about it. So we took that information, we called it that dusty old information from those dusty old history books, and we converted that into cultural ammunition. And we organized ATAC. ATAC. ATAC was founded around late May, early June of 2002, when we found out about what happened at 6th and Market. We read the works of the great Ed Lawler. And we were outraged. And even before then, I mean, I pretty much got my African-centered consciousness in 1976 when I saw Alex Haley's Roots, and I realized that we have a history beyond slavery. And then I was on my way to appreciate the grandeur of ancient Africa and the courage of my enslaved ancestors. So people would always say to me, "Hey, Mike," this is when we were trying to decide what we're going to do about George Washington enslaving Black folks in Philadelphia, America's first White House. So I say, "Mike, you always talk about the ancestors and you always talk about avenging them. Why don't we call ourselves ATAC?" I said, "ATAC? That makes no sense. ATTACK." They said, "No, ATAC. Let's call ourselves Avenging the Ancestors and let's build a broad based coalition." So it's ATAC, Avenging the Ancestors Coalition. And even though we were angry Black folks and still are angry Black folks, we were rational, we were level headed, we were strategic. The first thing we did after we came together in our first meetings, our first several meetings, were at the Bowser Law Center down near 16th and Lombard. And this Bowser Law Center was a reconverted mansion. I'd say it's the greatest, or back then was the greatest law office building in Philadelphia. Can you imagine those colonial mansions they used to have in the 1800s and early 1900s? Well, that's what this building was. And Mr. Bowser, because he's such a great lawyer, had money. He purchased that building and he called me in to work with him because he was about to retire. And he told me, he called me in because he had read some stuff in the newspaper about me protesting and yelling and screaming and doing what Black lawyers are supposed to do. So out of the clear blue, he didn't know me. I didn't know him apart from what my parents told me about him. And he called me into his office, and the rest is history. So anyway, we're meeting in his majestic conference room in this majestic reconverted mansion that was the Bowser Law Center. And we brought folks in, local activists, and they decided that we would call ourselves ATAC, ATAC, Avenging the Ancestors Coalition. And we were strategic in our approach. What we did was we identified every African American elected official based in Philly. So if you were African American and you were the mayor, you got a letter. If you were African American and you were in city council, you got a letter. If you were African American and was a state senator or a state representative based in Philly, you got a letter. If you were in the Congress and you were based in Philly, you got a letter. And basically what the letter said is this: "Hey, did you know that George Washington enslaved Black men, women, and children at America's first White House right here at 6th and Market? And did you know that they're about to move the Liberty Bell Center to 6th and Market? And when they realized that that was America's first White House, the federal government was going to have another monument, another memorial to George Washington. Forget about the enslaved Black folks. They were going to do something about George Washington. And that was totally inequitable. What I mean by that is this: George Washington has more memorials and more monuments and more statues to him than any other person in American history. So why the hell does he need another one at 6th and Market?" So we began to meet with the National Park Service. We began to meet with Independence National Historical Park. And the way it works is, because I'm going to explain how this ties together. And by the way, folks, got about maybe 15 more minutes before our guest comes on. So let me begin to wrap this up because I really want folks to understand what I'm saying. So the way it works when you see all these national parks, on the top level is the Interior Department. The Interior Department owns, from a legal standpoint, a governmental standpoint, owns all the federal lands in the country. And the reason why I say a legal standpoint or government standpoint, because the land really belongs to the native folks, the indigenous folks, the red people. But because the white folks from Europe had guns, they were able to steal it and create their government and basically commit genocide against our red brothers and sisters. Pardon me, folks. So what we did was we sent that letter. It went to all these African American elected officials, and it talked about, hey, the importance of the site, and said that we want to make sure that whether it's the Interior Department that controls all the federal lands, including 6th and Market, or the National Park Service, which is just below the Interior Department, and they concern themselves with the region. And then you got on the local level right here in Philadelphia, Independence National Historical Park. So we explained to these elected officials that, we've been reaching out to these governmental officials. And the good news is that the officials didn't say, no, we won't tell the story of slavery. But what they basically said was this: hey, this is going to be another memorial to George Washington and maybe a small component regarding slavery. We said, no, it should be reversed. It should be a monument, a commemoration of the greatness of our enslaved African ancestors as a project, as a historical site, and maybe a small component about George Washington. Because, like I said, George Washington is everywhere when it comes to statues and monuments and memorials. Can we have at least one thing for our enslaved African ancestors? So it became a matter of degree. Would this be a George Washington memorial, or would it be a slavery memorial? And when we reached out to elected officials, surprisingly, we got some really quick and favorable responses. And big shout out to the then mayor at the time, the Honorable Mayor John Street, because he wrote us back. And again, I'm at the Bowser Law Center. He wrote to my law office and said, hey, Mr. Court, thank you for sending me that letter. We were not aware of the history of that site. I'm really pleased that you sent it. I'm so pleased. I'm going to organize something called the Mayor's Oversight Committee, and I'm going to kick in $1.5 million to jumpstart an investigation. And the rest, as they say, is history. When he did that, then you had Congressman Shaka Fatai to kick in some federal money. And along with him was Congressman Bob Brady, kicked in some federal money. So now we're on the roll, but the fight is still going on. ATAC was founded in 2002, and we began our battle in June of 2002. And that battle began in 2002 and went on until the grand opening took place on December 15, 2010. That means 8 years of activism and protest and demonstration and petitioning. 8 years. And then on December 15, 2010, at 12 noon at 6th and Market, the grand opening of the first, I repeat, the first slavery memorial of its kind on federal property in the history of the United States of America. That's that site. Since December 15, ATAC from 2002 to 2010. On December 15, 2010, the grand opening of that site took place, and it was a wonderful thing for the city and wonderful thing for the state and wonderful thing for the region, and a wonderful thing for the country. And since there were international tourists, it was actually a wonderful thing for the world until it wasn't. And it wasn't 15 years later, in January of 2025, when the guy in the White House, whose name I will not mention, he issued dozens of executive orders when he was sworn in January of 2025. And every single one that had anything to do with Black people was anti-Black, whether it was DEI, whether it was affirmative action, whether it was voting rights. Among those dozens of executive orders he issued, every single one pertaining to Black people was anti-Black. So we knew what was in store. That's January of 2025. Fast forward to March of 2025. He issued more executive orders. And one in particular basically said this, not basically, exactly said this. This is the guy in the White House talking. I'm looking around the country. I'm looking at federal historical sites, and I don't like what I see in many of them, because many of them that I see should be shut down because they, quote, inappropriately disparage, unquote, Americans past and present. Inappropriately disparage. He's saying that some historical sites didn't make white people look good. And because he didn't like that, he said he was going to see which ones are to be shut down. This is March of 2025. Fast forward to May of 2025. Remember, I told you have the Interior Department, the National Park Service, and then Independence National Historical Park. He appointed a guy by the name of Doug Burgum. The guy in the White House appointed a guy by the name of Doug Burgum to be the Secretary of the Interior Department. And based on the guy in the White House's executive orders from January, and more specifically, executive orders from March, in May of 2025, the Interior Department Secretary Doug Burgum specifically targeted 6th and Market and said that there were 13 items there he didn't like, and therefore the site could be shut down in 120 days. 120 days brought us to September 17. So as of September 17, that site could have been completely shut down or censored or whitewashed. That's when the people rose up. When I say the people rose up, I, along with a sister by the name of Rosalind McPherson. Rosalind McPherson was involved early on, around 2003, 2004, when the mayor appointed her to basically coordinate and organize all this stuff so we can all be on the same page. And when word began to slip out that the 6th and Market Street site could be shut down, Rosalind McPherson was at the site. This would have been in August, early August. And I was at the site, and we came together and we said, hey, back in 2003, 4, 5, when this whole thing kicked off, we thought that once we got it done, it would be permanent. It would be forever. But here we are back again, trying to save what we thought was permanent. So Rosalind McPherson came up with a great idea. She said, hey, why don't we put together an umbrella group that consists not only of ATAC from the activist standpoint, but let's bring in archaeologists, many who worked with us back in early 2000, and architects and historians and preservationists and tour guides. And that was a great vision by Roz. So based on that vision, that suggestion by Roz McPherson, we organized something called the President's House / Slavery Memorial Alliance. Let me repeat that. The President's House / Slavery Memorial Alliance. And ATAC is just one component of many components. So this umbrella organization, we began to hold rallies and meetings and protests, and we issued a strongly worded letter from our lawyers. And the letter was dated September 11. And the letter went to the local head of the National Park Service, the local head of Independence National Historical Park. And the letter basically said this: hey, we're reading these newspaper articles in prestigious newspapers, New York Times, Washington Post, that kind of thing, that are telling us that the federal government, through the guy in the White House, could shut this site down. We don't want to rely solely on media reports, even if they come from reputable newspapers. We want to know specifically the guy in the White House, the Interior Department Secretary, the National Park Service, Independence National Historical Park. We want to know specifically what you're planning to do. And we cited one of the executive orders and the directive that targeted 6th and Market. And we said, hey, tell us precisely and officially what you plan to do. We messenger delivered those letters. We postal mailed those letters. We emailed those letters, and the federal government refused to respond. They never answered. We even called a number of times. In fact, the deadline for the shutdown could have been September 17. Interior Department Secretary Doug Burgum happened to be in Philly 2 days later, September 19. And we tried to hand deliver the same letter to him, but his security and his assistants wouldn't allow that to happen. But we know they know about it because they received the stuff that we mailed, messenger delivered, and postal mailed. We know they got it, but they still haven't responded. So what does that mean? That means that that site at America's First White House, the President's House / Slavery Memorial at 6th and Market, it could be shut down next month, next week, tomorrow, an hour from now, 5 minutes from now, or right now. And we have our attorneys lined up, but our attorneys can't do anything until the guy in the White House does something. In other words, we can't run to a federal judge and complain about what the guy in the White House did until he does it. He can talk all day long to the media about what he plans to do, and he can talk all day long about that September 17 deadline, but we legally have to wait until he does something. But I got to tell you, without naming names, we have some of the top litigators and legal scholars in the Philadelphia region who are ready. They got their army together. They got their weapons together, and the weapons are fully loaded. But we can't, and speaking metaphorically, of course, but we can't fire those weapons with a lawsuit until the guy in the White House actually does something to shut down the site. But we're ready. As soon as he moves, we have a counter move ready to go. And here's the thing I need to share in the next 5 minutes before we get to our guest. I told you that the grand opening of this historic site, 6th and Market, the President's House / Slavery Memorial, where George Washington held 9 Black men, women, and children illegally. And here's why I said earlier it's legal. There is something in Pennsylvania called the Gradual Abolition Act. And the Gradual Abolition Act of 1780 basically said this. Hey, because the Quakers had a lot of power in the Pennsylvania legislature, and they were anti-slavery. Most of them were abolitionists, even though some of them were involved in slavery, but they were the exception. The rule, the policy, even the practice of the Quakers was to oppose slavery. So because Pennsylvania had a lot of Quakers, they were able to get the state legislature to pass a law in 1780 called the Gradual Abolition Act, which basically said this. Hey, if you come from outside of Pennsylvania and you bring enslaved Black people in here, and if you hold them for 6 months straight, those Black folks can petition for their freedom. That was the 1780 Gradual Abolition Act. And then what happened is this. George Washington arrives in 1790, and he figures that what he's going to do is skirt the law. He decides that what he's going to do is close to the 6-month deadline. He's going to, what the terminology at the time was, rotate the slaves. I hate the term slaves because our people weren't slaves. A slave is a thing. Our people weren't slaves. They were enslaved human beings. So this whole thing about rotating means that shortly before the 6-month deadline, he would take those 9 Black men, women, and children and either take them back to Virginia or just cross state lines and then bring them right back. Why? Because then that 6-month clock has to start all over again. He started doing this when he arrived in 1790. But here's the thing, and this is why what he was doing was illegal. I told you that the Gradual Abolition Act was from 1780. Well, 8 years after that, in 1788, the legislature, they were wise. The legislature said, hey, we're finding out that people are, quote unquote, rotating the slaves. If we find out that you're doing that, we're going to expedite the process for those Black men, women, and children to be free, and we're going to impose a heavy fine against you. That was in 1788. So when George Washington arrived 2 years later in 1790, he wasn't just a law skirter, he was a law breaker. And here's where you come in before we get to our guest and our next topic. Not this coming Monday, but the following Monday, write this down, December 15, 2025, at 12 o'clock noon. Our producer, our engineer extraordinaire, got it right there on the screen. December 15, 2 weeks from now, week and a half from now, Monday, December 15, 12 o'clock noon, 6th and Market, is the 15th anniversary of the grand opening of the President's House Slavery Memorial. We need you to join us. We need you to be there. How do you get information? More information, email us, atac.avengingtheancestors@gmail.com. atac.avengingtheancestors@gmail.com. But write this down, folks. Monday, December 15, 12 o'clock noon, 6th and Market, the 15th anniversary. Monday, December 15, 12 o'clock noon, 6th and Market, which is the President's House Slavery Memorial, is the 15th anniversary event. And it's not just a celebratory event, it's a rally to save the site. Please contact us, atac.avengingtheancestors@gmail.com, right there on the screen, atac.avengingtheancestors@gmail.com, or call us, 215-552 8751. 215-552-8751. Once again, 215-552-8751. We made history on December 15 of 2010 with this historic slavery memorial. Now we're going to make history to save that historic site. I'm going to talk more about this a little later in the show, but right now we got to jump to the star of the show. I had announced earlier in the show that we were going to have a guest at this time, 4 o'clock, a sister by the name of Pamela Boyce Simms. And the reason why I wanted Pamela to be with us is because she's spearheading the Black Men's Health Initiative, where historic Cheney University, my alma mater. So as we bring Pamela Boyce Simms to the screen, let me just spend a couple seconds talking a little bit about her, and I'm going to turn it over to her. As I mentioned, Pamela Boyce Simms will be spearheading the Black Men's Health Initiative at Cheney University, my alma mater. And this is what I want to share with you about her before you hear from her. Pamela Boyce Simms is an evolutionary culture designer and movement builder for turbulent times. That means now, because we're certainly in turbulent times. With decades, I'm not sure what the decades part, because she looks like she's 32, 33 years old, but we'll get to that in a second. With decades of leadership experience, Pamela specializes in helping individuals and communities navigate systems change and intensifying disruptions. She's the CEO of Singularity Botanicals, and I'm going to ask her more about that, but I can tell you now, Singularity Botanicals coordinates a network of 15 medicinal herb growth sites. Without further ado, Pamela Boyce Simms. Pamela, how are you doing today?
I am really well and glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
You're thanking me. I'm thanking you. We're members of the Mutual Admiration Society. I appreciate you saying that. First, before you jump into the health initiative coming up, talk a little bit more about yourself, because you have an impressive resume. When I have guests on like you, I kind of want them to brag about their expertise. Why? So that people know that these guests know exactly what they're talking about. So a little more about yourself, and then we'll jump into Singularity Botanicals. The microphone and camera are yours.
Sure. Thank you. Well, to boil it down, to really get to the essence of what that decades and decades of career experience is, I'm always focused on internal and external environmental resilience building. So the external version, I'm a clinical herbalist as well as a psychotherapist. So I use complementary integrative medicine, holistic medicine that combines conventional medicine with holistic health practices to give a best case scenario for every client that's sitting across from me, and for groups of people, and for organizations. So the external resilience building is literally, I grow medicinal herbs at 20 grow sites in 5 states, including right here in Pennsylvania. Most of them are in Pennsylvania and right in southeastern Pennsylvania, where I'm located, but they stretch across the entire state to State College and up in the Appalachian region as well. Texas, New York, Vermont, et cetera, et cetera. So the external environmental resilience building is about being of strong health, which in and of itself for us is a revolutionary act to ensure our own self-care and well-being. So that's the external piece. And we also teach people how to grow the medicinal herbs. It's not just growing them and supplying them. It's here's how you do it. Work beside us. Take command and control over growing your own medicine. So that's the external piece of what I've done for years and years and years as a clinical herbalist and an herb grower now of a network of growers. And I have an international network. It's called Community Supported Enlightenment, of people who do deep internal self-exploration that then infuses the movement building. And the idea behind that, actually not the idea, the experience that actually manifests as, is movements shoot themselves in the foot when they're analytical. They're using strategies that are matrices they put on things, or a superficial kind of harking back to the way we've always done things, they don't tend to be sustainable unless people that are involved in them, especially the pillars, the people that are the foundation builders, are doing deep, ongoing, perpetual self examination and self transformation and self transmutation, so that they're interacting as effectively as they can with their environment. They're aligned with and attuned to their psychological being, their emotional being, their spiritual being. And only when you've got a scaffolding of people like that, that are holding the space, they're holding down the fort for a movement, and not just flash in the pan, but on an ongoing basis, can movements really be sustainable over a long period of time. So that's how the internal environmental resilience building, the self-examination done in community, infuses the external environmental resilience building. And that's about health, holistic healing. I have a complementary integrative medicine team that works with me. And I also work with the gentleman whose webinar we'll be talking about later, Dr. Otis Brawley, who is the Black oncologist that literally walks on water in the international cancer oncology world, who has pulled back the curtain. He's so untouchable in the field that he works in that he's pulled back the curtain in a book. He's working on another book at the moment that shows the inside, the back office, the back story, the inside story of how the medical system views us. He has kind of laid it bare. So he is a gentleman who, from the conventional medicine side, informs what we do and gives us a quarterly webinar there's one coming up in January that I'd like to share some information about when we have a moment. So that's a big nutshell, a big encapsulation.
You know, it's funny because behind me, I have a picture of Brother Malcolm X, and I love what Malcolm X said, pretty much everything he said, but one in particular, he always talked about making it plain. And that's exactly what you do, because far too often we get doctors and lawyers and CEOs and psychotherapists who use this big jargon and nobody has any idea what they're talking about. Brother Malcolm says, make it plain. You did just that, made it plain. We're going to come back to Dr. Otis Brawley and some of the other issues that you raised, but let's quickly jump to the Black Men's Health Initiative at Cheney University. And I didn't know as much as I know now about you, but you appear to be the perfect person for this. Tell us more about the Black Men's Health Initiative at Cheney University. And in connection with your answer, tell me if you've encountered what many folks in your position encounter amongst Black men, that we're, quote unquote, too proud to beg, that we won't ask for help because of our macho attitude. I'll turn it over to you.
Sure thing. This is not a webinar or a flash in the pan event where we invite people to come and hear some information. Black families have gotten the pamphlet at the church health fair or the community health fair about prostate cancer and men's health for a long time. What this Men's Health Sovereignty Project is about is building a scaffolding against sustainability, a foundation, a scaffolding that is nationwide for ongoing Black men's health advocacy built by the men themselves. And what we've done, Singularity Botanicals functions as an umbrella organization or a home base camp for massive men's networks that are the trusted networks, the networks that we have known, some of them for hundreds of years. The Prince Hall Masons, we have a gentleman representing the Prince Hall Masons nationwide. We have a strong presence here, and they have a strong presence here in Pennsylvania, but nationwide. We have a gentleman representing the labor unions, the laborers' unions among unions. We have another gentleman representing the church networks. This is our core group of people across denominations. We have Black Greek letter fraternities represented. We have the HBCUs, which is where Cheney is going to be running point for us. We have justice involved men. So Singularity Botanic, and this is literally tens of thousands of Black men who trust their Greek or their Black Greek organization. They trust the Kappas. They trust the Masons. They trust their alma mater. These are networks where we don't have to convince or cajole people to do something for Black men. These are Black men who have been in service to Black men and the Black community, as in the case of the Masons, literally for hundreds of years. And for most of them, this is the case. So what we're doing, we are organizing what we call health sovereignty circles in each one of these massive, massive networks. And these health sovereignty circles are the first order of business. We're dealing with prostate cancer as the first issue, largely because this is what is claiming so many men. And so many men, well, most men have some kind of prostate issue at a certain age. But when we get into the prostate cancer numbers, we know that Black men are diagnosed at 73% higher rate than white men. We also know that Black men are 120% more likely to die of it. And it is because precisely of what you said, Michael, Black men wait until something is falling off or they're doubled over in pain before they will actually go in. So the outcomes are worse because we are not getting the information. So this scaffolding in the HBCUs, in the Masons, in the unions, etc., is a network within each big network that then comes together with these representatives in our core group that are having cross or trans network conversations that build an ongoing set of hubs, nationwide hubs in each network, and then the networks talking to each other, through which men are going to create, are in the process of creating, what we're calling a self-care sovereignty field guide. It is a multimedia, ongoing, evolutionary resource. So when a man goes into the urologist's or the oncologist's office and he gets a diagnosis, or he's terrified of what he's seeing in his own health, that usually knocks people for a loop when that conversation starts. Men have expressed the need to know, how do I ask these questions? How do I stay lucid and present so the doctor is not riding roughshod over me? I can advocate for myself. I can choose the course of treatment that I want, as opposed to being pushed into one kind of treatment or another. So that resource is being collated by groups of men in all of these different networks. We have a research team that is putting that together so that men can have that in hand, online, in their at their service as they're dealing with the oncologist or the urologist. We also have a team of people, as I mentioned, the complementary integrative medicine people. It's not 15 minutes with a doctor and you're out. We have acupuncturists and massage therapists, and myself as an herbalist and licensed nutritionist, and all kinds of folks to wrap around men that also have this resource that men are developing, so that they have the ammunition they need. They have the backup. They have ongoing support as they are going about this process. And then these same hubs that are gathering all of the information about men's experience, medical distrust, medical mistrust. They are going to be information sharing, and people like Dr. Brawley will keep Black men on top of the cutting edge research that is being done in cancer research at this point. So I'll stop.
Let me just this. Perfect timing, because what I wanted to do is let you know that you're on Philly Cam, and Philly Cam has an audience base of over 350 local TV households. So the stuff that you're saying is going out far and wide, and I'm hoping people are receptive. Those who just tuned in, you're listening to Pamela Boyce Simms, an evolutionary culture designer and movement builder for turbulent times. And these certainly are turbulent times. As she mentioned, she has decades of leadership experience and specializes in helping individuals and communities navigate systems change and intensifying disruptions. She also talked about her role as CEO of Singularity Botanicals. We're running out of time, Pamela, but I'm going to give you the final 3 or 4 minutes. This show is called TV Courtroom, and like in many courtroom proceedings, it's a chance for a closing argument. So we're going to give you your chance for a closing argument. The microphone and camera are yours for the final 3 or 4 minutes. Anything you want to add, repeat, highlight, please do so.
My closing argument would be that we need to actually devise a medical system that reflects what Black men need. Right at this moment, we're focused on Black men's health and prostate cancer. I would direct you, your audience, to the Black Trust Notes on Substack. That there are a series of, some of them have audio, all of them I've written. It's about medical mistrust. It's about mistrust of different systems, and a system that we should mistrust, the food system that is basically killing us. My Thanksgiving post was all about that. So Black Trust Notes, or you can just put in Pamela Boyce Simms on Substack. Please know that next Tuesday, December 9th, from 7 to 8 p.m., Cheney University is going to be doing a briefing for HBCUs. I'll be doing a briefing for Cheney, and Cheney's going to be running point for that network of folks. It's going to be a Zoom online briefing for anybody that is HBCU affiliated. Cheney is running point there. Again, that's next Tuesday, 7 to 8 p.m. You can go to singularitybotanicals.net. Again, singularitybotanicals.net. Click on our story and you'll see contact us. You can send your email address if you want a Zoom link to participate in next Tuesday, December 9th, 7 to 8, how HBCU affiliated people, and that includes Black Greek that are coming through HBCU, Black Greek letter organizations. So that is a briefing on the project. We'll go in depth on that. Also, on January 8th, Dr. Otis Brawley, the gentleman who, as I mentioned, walks on water, Black oncologist extraordinaire, who has pulled back the curtain on what the medical system is really doing to us and how they view us as data points in their business plan profit scenarios. That is, again, January 8th, 6:30 to 7:30. That's Dr. Otis Brawley telling you the inside story, what Black men need to know about prostate cancer, but are not told. Again, go to singularitybotanicals.net, click on our story, contact us, and send us the email. Your email will get you the Zoom link, etc. So those are the key things right now to actually get you connected with information and the backstory behind how our community is viewed by the medical system and how we can take command and control, not just know about it, but organize to actually counterbalance it so we are not dropping like flies, which is a case at this point, especially when it comes to men's health.
I got to tell you, folks who tuned in, this was a great interview featuring Pamela Boyce Simms. It's only supposed to be maybe 10 to 12 minutes, but I had to keep going because she has so much information to share. Now, final few seconds, please give us that contact information once again, because I know folks were scrambling to get their pens and pads out.
Sure. Singularity Botanicals with an S.net. Singularitybotanicals.net. Click on our story in the navigation bar. Contact us will come up. Put your email address in there and you'll get a Zoom link. You'll get flip books. You'll get information about the upcoming events, which are for the HBCU Cheney University running point on Thank you for that, for putting that up there. On January 9th, which is next Tuesday, 7 to 8, excuse me, December 9th, Tuesday, 7 to 8, and January 8th is Dr. Brawley's webinar. That is 6:30 to 7:30. Just send us your information, or you can email me, pbs@singularitybotanicals.net. That's for Pamela Boyce Simms, pbs@singularitybotanicals.net. Hope to see a lot of you online.
And I'm sure you will. And I thank you, Pamela, for thanking our engineer, our producer, Roland, for giving them a shout out for putting the information up on the screen. And by the way, Pamela, we have recorded this. So within the next hour, we're going to send you the recording. And if you want to send it out to folks, they'll be able to see and hear what you just shared. Valuable, literally, no hyperbole, literally life-saving information. Pamela, I appreciate having you on. I'm going to reach out to you to see if I can steal you to be a guest on my radio courtroom show, just as you were a guest today on my TV courtroom show.
I would love to. I really appreciate the opportunity. Thank you so much.
And I think we both want to thank Karen Roach for doing what she does to put the word out in regard to historic Cheyney University. Big shout out, folks, to Pamela Boyce Simms. And we have about maybe 4 or 5 minutes left, and I want to wrap up what I started talking about at the very beginning of the show, because it's that important. Just as the information that Pamela Boyce Simms shared, that is literally life-saving, we need to save Black history here in Philadelphia, here in Pennsylvania, here in America. In fact, here on the planet. The guy in the White House issued a threat this past May, threatening to shut down the historic President's House / Slave Memorial at 6th and Market. Think about it. Not many of you knew, one, that America's first White House was right here in Philadelphia. Two, you didn't know that George Washington enslaved Black men, women, and children at that site. And three, that a local Black grassroots organization called ATAC, ATAC, Avenging the Ancestors Coalition, fought from 2002 to 2010. And that 8-year battle ended in victory, because on December 15, 2010, at 12 o'clock noon, there was the grand opening of the first, I repeat, the first slavery memorial of its kind on federal property in the history of the United States of America. Everything was great until it wasn't, until the guy in the White House got elected in November of 2024, issued anti-Black executive orders in January of 2025, issued some more anti-Black executive orders in March of 2025, and then had his Interior Department secretary in May of 2025 target that slavery memorial at 6th and Market, threatening to shut it down in 120 days, which would have been September 17. But because we all raised hell, and not just angry Black folks like me, but so many folks raised hell that we had to expand beyond ATAC and form an umbrella organization called the President's House / Slavery Memorial Alliance, headed by Roz McPherson, who had the vision of incorporating people of different races, different religions, different professions to create a much larger organization. And here we are now, exactly 15 years from the December 15, 2010 grand opening. As important as that was, what's coming up on December 15 of 2025 might be even more important, because that's going to save history. So look at the screen, give a big shout out to our producer, our engineer, Roland, and write this down. Monday, December 15, 2025, 12 noon at 6th and Market, we're going to have a 15th anniversary event and rally where we're going to not only tell you the history of the site, and tell you about the activism that has been organized to save the site, but how you can join us. And you can join us by becoming a member of ATAC. And how do you become a member of ATAC? How do you find out more information about what's going to take place on Monday, December 15th, 12 noon at the 6th and Market Street site of the President's House slash Slavery Memorial? Email attack at ATAC dot avengingtheancestors at gmail.com. ATAC dot avengingtheancestors at gmail.com. Or you can give us a call. The number is 215-552-8751. 215-552-8751. If American history is important to you, you must participate. You notice I didn't say just Black American history, because this site, the story of slavery, that's American history. So we're talking about not just saving Black history at that site, we're talking about saving American history at that site. Write it down, folks. Monday, not this coming Monday, but the following Monday. That's Monday, December 15, 2025, 12 noon, 6 and Market at the site of the President's House slash Slavery Memorial, the 15-year anniversary and rally to save the site. And not just save that site, to enhance the site, make it better, make it bigger, and also work with other folks in other cities and other states to save their historical sites. More information, email us at atac.avengingtheancestors at gmail.com, atac.avengingtheancestors at gmail.com, or call us 215-552-8751. And while you're writing stuff down, remember what Pamela Boyce Simms talked about, taking place this coming Tuesday. That's December 9 from 7 to 8 p.m., all in connection with the Black Men's Health Initiative at historic Cheney University. And how do you get more information about that? As Pamela Boyce Simms notified us, just contact singularitybotanicals.net. That's singularitybotanicals.net, or you can email her directly at PBS. That stands for Pamela Boyce Simms, PBS at singularitybotanicals.net. And again, our producer, our engineer extraordinaire, Roland, has posted that on the screen. Want to give him a big shout out for being so smooth, so efficient, and so very professional. Folks, we run out of time, so let me end today's show like I end every show. It goes like this: Think Black, I'm out.